Hey, welcome to Books and Brew. I'm your host, Andrew Huff. I'm a novelist, screenwriter, media producer. And this show is about sitting down with fellow fiction authors, getting to know their writing process so that I can steal it and use it for my own success. Now, here's the thing I know about writers is when we write, we love to drink something. Usually that's some form of a brew like coffee or tea. And so what's going to be fun about this show is we're going to sit down with writers. We're going to talk about creative writing process, but we're also going to try out their favorite writing brew see if I like it. And so let's meet today's guest. Clint Hall is the author of multiple speculative fiction stories that have appeared in both magazines and anthologies. Clint's story, Siren's Kiss, won Havok magazine's annual contest and was featured in the July 2017 issue. Clint lives in Georgia with his wife and his two boys. He's already raising his boys right by introducing them early and often to Star Wars. Welcome to the show, Clint.
First time, man, you nailed it. Am I like ruining like the facade by saying that was your first time going through the intro and it was perfect?
Yeah. Thank you. Don't worry. Thanks, I've got plenty of bloopers from other episodes.
I'm excited.
That I'm sure we'll make an appearance.
Yeah. So sorry if I'm already your worst guest by calling that out, but no, I'm really glad to be here.
Nice. No, this is great. Hey, here's one thing that I wanted to do before we jump in. Usually, Clint, I have you introduce the brew that we're going to be drinking, which I'm very excited about today. But one of the things I wanted to kind of quickly ask you, we're going to get into a little bit of an interview portion first, is to define speculative, because I said that in your intro. I think sometimes people haven't heard that word a ton. And so tell us what speculative fiction is.
Well, and actually what's interesting to think about too, because I'm assuming that the majority of your audience, they're probably all writers, or at least people who are maybe interested in this. Something that I found is that the use of the term speculative fiction is sort of different from the CBA, which is the Christian market, versus the general market. So when you say, let's start with CBA. When in the Christian market, when you say speculative fiction, it's very much, I feel like, kind of an umbrella term for anything that is sci-fi, fantasy, or horror. So if it has any kind of magic or monsters or time travel or anything along those lines, it's probably going to be called speculative fiction. What I have found is that, so I'm actually more of a general market author myself. Everything that I've published has been a little bit more general market. And speculative fiction is still used, but not as much and not really in the same way. So when I sort of identify what I write, I usually say that I'm a sci-fi fantasy author because my stuff is, again, fantastical worlds and magic and time travel and a lot of that kind of stuff. When you say speculative fiction to a general market person, it is still sort of sci-fi fantasy, but it's much less of sort of a leap, I feel like, from our current reality. It might be, it's like some people might kind of say it's a little bit more like magical realism. Like it's sort of our world, but maybe just something is just a little bit different and a little bit supernatural. So when you say speculative fiction to a general market person, it's almost like an alternative to sci-fi fantasy, although it's certainly related. So I do think it's important for you to be aware of who you're talking to when you use the term speculative fiction, because I started out, everything I was doing was Christian market contests and conferences and all that kind of stuff. And then when I started going to general market stuff and using that same term, it was received, fine, people still knew what I was talking about, but it was a little bit different.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. And I am already, this is going to be a fantastic interview because we're going to be getting into so much stuff because I'm even interested in the balance, or in the differences between CBA and general market and that kind of thing. But this show is all about the brew. It is about the books, but also the brew. So
not really.
I want to know what I'm going to be drinking today. So Clint, why don't you introduce us to what we got, your brew?
Okay. Well, so again, right. I watched this. This is, you call this a web series, right? That is sort of the right thing for me to say here. Okay. I watched this web series. And you have had on people who really know their stuff about coffee and tea and everything. I do not. I just, what we're drinking today though, it's Jittery Joe's. Good. Yeah, this is Jittery Joe's Wake and Bake, and it is. I can talk a little bit about it. It's kind of an earthy flavored kind of a coffee, but I don't really know that much about why I like it or what goes into the roasting and all that. What I know is that it means a lot to me because Jittery Joe's is a coffee roaster that is based out of Athens, Georgia. They started in, I did do a little bit of research. They started in 94 and they were connected to the 40 Watt Club, which is a very, very famous music club in Athens, Georgia. Athens is famous for music. 40 Watt specifically is kind of the home of REM. And I think that early 90s would have been about the time that REM was playing in Atlanta a lot too. So Jittery Joe's is very closely just ingrained in Athens.
Yeah.
This coffee is actually done in conjunction with a brewery, a beer brewery in Athens called Terrapin. It's like inspired by like their oatmeal stout or something.
Yeah.
So I think part of the reason why I love this coffee so much, I don't live in Athens anymore. I'm about an hour outside of Athens, but that's where I went to school. I went to school in Athens at the University of Georgia. So I think it reminds me of that. It's always going to feel like home to me. So I think I like pouring it in my cup in the mornings because it kind of just feels like a connection to that place that just meant so much to me, and the art scene and the music and all of those things that I just loved so much during my time there. So that's what we're drinking.
Probably should do this at times when I have people on, is also find out their water to coffee ratio.
I got nothing for you there. Yeah, you can ask the next person. Although I do put in a little bit of milk just to cool it down a little bit, but which I know for some people is blasphemy. But
there we go. I'm gonna have this right off screen. Okay, that's the little plunger.
It looks like. Did you watch The Mandalorian?
Yeah.
It looks like
That's perfect. Yeah. You know what? Eventually, I'll have enough like electronic stuff and like coffee stuff going that it'll look like I'm in a cockpit of like a Star Wars starship, which would be a dream come true. So
okay, well, bring me back for that one for sure.
Yeah. All right, you got 5 minutes. Tell us about your stories, where, what you've written, and why we should buy them.
Yeah, why you should buy them. Actually, so you should buy them. There's a really good reason, which is so I am mostly published in short fiction. Actually, I have had just to really be very transparent, I've had a couple of offers for my novels. I haven't quite had the right offer yet, and I don't mean to make it sound like I'm not grateful for the offers that I've received, but I'm being very patient in terms of waiting to sign a novel contract. But I have published a lot of short fiction. So the first one I'll tell you about is a short story called Breath of the Cherubim, and it's in a book called X Marks the Spot. This is an anthology that is put out every year by Superstars Writing Seminars. Superstars is run by Kevin J. Anderson, who sci-fi fantasy fans will recognize as the guy who picked up the Dune franchise after Frank Herbert passed away. He's also written a lot of Star Wars novels. He runs a press.
I believe I've read all of his Star Wars novels.
Okay, well, yeah. So there you go. Yeah, you know Kevin J. Anderson, right? So they do this every year to raise money for what's called the Don Hodge Memorial Scholarship, which sends people to Superstars Writing Seminar if they can't make it. But anyways, enough about that and about the story. The story is about a priest who discovers the supposed location of a sword that can pierce the veil between heaven and earth, and he believes it's false. He finds this manuscript, reads it because that's his mission, and then he destroys it. He's on his way back home, and he is kidnapped by a crew of pirates. This is during the age of piracy, obviously. So he's kidnapped by this crew of pirates, and these are cursed men who have done all the worst things that you could possibly imagine. And the evil is literally rotting them from the inside out, and there is what they say a darkness that is coming for them. But they find out what he knows. They capture him and they force him essentially to take them to the supposed location of this sword, not because they believe that they can actually walk into heaven, but they just want to see it. They believe that they have seen everything else that this world has to offer. They have seen all the magic and wonder die away, and all they want is a glimpse of the first light before the final darkness claims them. So that is this story, which is, again, Breath of the Cherubim in X Marks the Spot. The other story that I will talk about is a story called One More Day, and it appears in an anthology called Warriors Against the Storm. Now, this anthology, the reason you should buy this is not to read my story. It is to support Mary Weber. Do you know Mary? I'm sure you know Mary. Everyone knows Mary.
Yeah, the name sounds familiar.
Yeah, so Mary Weber is a fantastic YA fantasy author, but I think it was a couple years ago now. Toxic mold poisoning in their home wreaked devastating impacts on her family's health and their economic situation. So to keep a long story short, the proceeds from this anthology go to benefit Mary and her family. And this is something that a lot of people who are associated with the Realm Makers Conference contributed stories to. So this story, the theme of this anthology was about basically fighting back against the storm, whatever that may mean to you. This particular story is about a warrior who at one point in his life believed that he was going to vanquish the evil. This is a story that, if I don't know if you have any major zombie fans in your fan base, but if they do, they will appreciate the difference between zombies and rage virus. This is a little bit more of a rage virus kind of a situation, but with kind of a spiritual bent to it. But anyways, and he believed that he was the one that was going to destroy all the demons and finish the monsters, right? And now, years into his life, things haven't gone the way that he thought they were going to go. His wife has passed away and left him with an infant son. His magic sword isn't quite so magic and powerful anymore. And the truth is that he's losing hope. But he has a baby to protect. And every night the monsters come. So this is sort of the story of him reconciling with that and dealing with that. And it's very much an action story, very much a, him versus the monsters type of thing. And I don't want to say too much more than that. It's fairly short. Right. It's only about 2,000 words. So if I say too much, I'll give it away. But that is One More Day. Both of these stories, Breath of the Cherubim and One More Day, are, depending on when this posts, they were recently named as finalists for the short story category in the Realm Awards. Oh, and nice. I'll find out mid-July whether or not they won. Yeah, so I'm actually a double finalist. Each story is a finalist. So one of them might be the winner. We'll see. But yeah, so those are the two stories I wanted to talk about. Awesome. I have no idea where I'm at on the 5-minute timer.
You nailed it, dude, right there.
Good.
We're perfect. At the 5 minutes. Yeah.
Nice.
That's really, really great. Cool.
That was the part I was most worried about. So it's all smooth sailing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So now the coffee cam, we're going to see that color, see how it looks. Oh man, this looks great. Again, I am just a fan of coffee, so I don't know how. That's a dirty little secret of the show too, right? Like, is I'm almost always going to like it. Even the teas, and I'm not that much of a tea drinker. I've become more of a tea drinker. Oh man, that looks really good. I'm giving our coffee cam the time to appreciate the color of this coffee.
Yeah.
And then it's my turn to drink. So first drinks.
Oh, yeah.
We got it right there. Now, we're on the fence on whether or not people really like to hear the slurping or not. So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So I've gotten different feedback.
Okay. You slurp.
So maybe I will slurp. I'll do only one slurp. Then all the rest of them are getting edited out.
Okay, good.
Because it's hot. Here we go.
Oh, that was a good one though. You had a little whistle in there too.
All right, dude.
Andy, do you remember how you and I met? Do you remember that? That was the first thing
I'm assuming. Yeah. Okay. So Clint and I met at this might be a running theme for some of the guests I have on here, at an ACFW conference, which stands for American Christian Fiction Writers Conference. And here's the fun thing about having you on, Clint, because you can affirm this. Just so everybody has a picture of this conference. It started out as the American Christian Romance Writers.
I believe that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was strictly for romance writers, but then they expanded. Well, it had grown to a degree that now when you go, our kind, which by that I mean male, is very rare to see at the ACFW conference.
It is. Yeah. There's not a lot of us.
When we see
each other in the hall, even if you don't know them, you're just like, what's up?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's very easy to get to know other dudes at that conference. Hundreds of people go, not a lot of men. And so it's actually, and here's the thing, because as a guy, if there's any dudes watching this, you might go, ooh, like, should I even go to this? Yes, you should. I think,
great conference.
I think it's a great conference. I think doing conferences in general are great, and you're going to find some that work for you and some that don't. And so I will make that little pitch for ACFW is I've enjoyed it. I've had times where I didn't enjoy it. So much of that is related to what you're trying to do as a writer, more so than it is the conference or anything like that. Any of that stuff in terms of learning craft, getting to know other writers, great opportunity. So we got our brew. We're going to talk about writing, and I've got a couple of different questions. Obviously, at the top, we talked a little bit about, this is a little bit of insight into the different, Christian versus non-Christian publishing.
Mhm.
And so I want to get into that a little bit, but I also am curious, and maybe this is where we can start and then come back around to that at the end, is so speculative, science fiction,
Mhm.
fantasy.
Yeah.
I am so fascinated by that type of writing because there's
Mhm.
so much that I wouldn't say you're inventing so much of it out of whole cloth, because obviously there's history behind you in terms of what people have written about and
Yep.
mythologies and all that kind of thing.
Sure.
But I mean, you get to visit other worlds if you want, right? And so,
Right.
how do you even start with an idea in terms of heading towards a story with speculative fiction? And kind of coupled with that, you can kind of start
Mhm.
there, like the whole world building, the whole,
Right.
like, you get an idea, how do you go from there? But then I also want to talk about faith elements inside of that. But you
Sure.
can
Sure.
start with the whole, man,
Yeah.
the world building aspect of that.
Okay. So I'm gonna respond to your question with a question. Did you ever watch Mr. Rogers as a kid?
Yes,
Okay. All right. So I actually did not. I wasn't a big Mr. Rogers kid. I have no idea why. I don't know why. But anyways,
that's
when Mr.
hurtful.
Rogers passed, yeah,
Hey,
when
that's
Mr.
already
Rogers,
two strikes
I
because
know,
you went to
I
the
know.
University of Georgia and you
Wait a
you
second. Who am I
didn't watch
talking to
Mr.
here?
Rogers.
Where do your allegiances lie? I don't. I mean,
Well, I grew up in East Tennessee, and so
oh, okay, all
my
right.
college team of choice, I didn't go there, but my college team of choice is the University of Tennessee. So
Still the balls. Okay,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
okay with that. I'm okay with that.
yeah.
Yeah, sure. Y'all will be back soon enough. Um, anyways, so when Mr. Rogers passed away a few years ago, obviously there was all this Mr. Rogers content because he meant so much to so many people. And someone put out like an auto tune, like music thing of him talking, but it was, I think the song was called Garden of Your Mind. And what basically the idea is, you can grow ideas in the garden of your mind. All you have to do is think and it'll grow. And that's how I feel about world building. I have a series that is 5 different worlds, each with 10,000 years of its own unique history, which when I came up with the concept felt overwhelming to me because I had never done anything like that. But the wonderful thing about your imagination is that all you need is the tiniest little seed of an idea. And the best thing to do, I think, is to write it down. I'm a big whiteboard guy. I love using a whiteboard, but just write down just the smallest little idea that you have for your world and then just think about it. And it's very surprising. And I understand why artists throughout the generations have talked about the muse or believed that an angel was whispering in their ear, because once you take that tiny little action, it is incredible the way that that seed will then just get just a little bit bigger and then just a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And you just keep kind of going. And before you know it, you have built this whole expansive world. But it does take a little bit of courage. It does take the faith of a mustard seed, right? To take that tiny little idea and have the faith to say, okay, I'm going to work on this. And then again, just keep building and building and building. So that is kind of my sort of like overarching sort of philosophy towards world building, which all you need is this as a kernel. And then you'd be surprised how much it can grow.
Well, so talk about this for a second, and this will be a good jumping off point for when we pull the curtain back on the industry a little bit.
Sure.
And that is, I'm sure that one of the big questions people often have is okay, so my background is in church ministry, and I went to seminary and all this kind of stuff. And so when I ask this question, I'm kind of already thinking, well, that's not the right question, and that is, how do faith elements interweave with science fiction and fantasy? Now, I laugh at that question only because I'm like, dude, read the Bible. Like,
Sure.
there is
Sure.
so much to this world that I think in a Western culture, especially, we kind of strip away the mystery of, or at least ignore it. And so that's the fun thing about science fiction and fantasy for me, is I do believe there is so much more to the world
Sure.
spiritually, and what God is doing, and
Sure.
obviously the forces of darkness and all that. And the Bible is rich with that kind of language.
Sure.
And so, but there is an element of, so even talking about, I've got a story for 4 different worlds, and I can just maybe even sense a little bit of a pull there for, like inner uh sort of your the faith elements interacting with those types of stories in a way that is interesting. I'm really curious how you kind of approach that, and that probably is going to give us a good talking point between Christian versus non-Christian, because how much is, you might not be in bringing in as much faith elements maybe in something that's not being written for a Christian audience. But talk about that.
Sure. It's a fantastic question. There's a lot to unpack. I feel like we could do an entire episode really about just the question that you just asked.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of sides to that too. And something that you didn't explicitly ask, but I think would maybe be there for a lot of writers is, what are all the other Christians I know going to say about this thing that I'm writing, right? What are they going to think that this says about me? And that is a challenging question. I've had people look at the work that I've written, people from like a Christian publishing, say, well, we can't write this because we have specific rules for angels. And if you're going to mention angels at all, you have to follow our rules. I totally respect that. That's absolutely fine. That is their prerogative. My stories, I feel like, are very allegorical. So, they are not meant to be taken literally, that like, hey, I think that this is how angels and demons work, or any of that kind of stuff. That's not the kind of story I write. And I do think you have to be very sort of upfront with your readers as much as you can in terms of who you are, because that may not be for everybody. Now, in terms of building your faith into it, I can only speak to my personal experience. But I would say, I'll just be as honest as I can. For me, if you look at the stories of the Bible, most of them are about people. Maybe I won't say most of them. A lot of them are about people struggling with faith. I mean, so funny is I recently reread Psalms, and I'm like, this whole thing is about like, God, where are you, and how could you, Yeah. And as an example, so one of the novels I recently wrote is about it's a world in which AI discovers the secrets of elemental magic and then uses them to overthrow humanity. And the lead character came from a very faith-based family. And he is angry at God for almost the entire story, because he's like, how could you create a power like this and then give it to them? And like, we can't even harness it, but you gave it to them. And I do think that is something that that faith-based people will often reconcile with, is that age-old question of good things happening to, or bad things happening to good people, right? And good things happening to people that we may think are bad. Yeah. So I do think, in terms of weaving my faith in, I often draw from my questions and my struggles. And I am not hesitant at all about putting those into my stories. I think it's best reflected in your character and the journeys that they're going through.
Okay, so I've written a story. I am a Christian. My story is maybe foundationally Christian, but also there's probably elements of it that are not, or at least maybe it doesn't hit some of the things that would label it Christian fiction.
Sure.
And so there's that question of publish in the Christian fiction industry, publish in the general market industry. And I want to talk a little bit about that from just your experience, only because I think everybody probably at some point, now there's people that are like, no, I'm writing Christian fiction. But at least I know for myself, and again, I'm going to speak from my experience.
Sure.
That was a question for me. Do I write in the Christian fiction market, or do I go general? And I was blessed with the opportunity to publish within the Christian fiction market. Right. But it was a struggle for a little bit, only because there are certain things that kind of are expected of those types of books. So anyway, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think you do have to, there's a couple of answers, right? I want to try to give you a useful answer, which is, I think you need to ask yourself who you think the audience is for the book. That's sort of the easy answer, I suppose, but it is also probably the most important, in terms of, because when we're talking about publishing, we're talking about the business side of the storytelling. We're talking about the selling and the marketing and all that kind of thing. So which shelf does it belong on, right? And it takes a level of self-awareness, I think. I do think that if you are considering general market, you can ask yourself things like, how am I best getting this story across, right? I heard someone once say that, it's like, listen, God didn't write his name on the side of every mountain. That doesn't make them any less majestic, and it doesn't make them any less of God's word. So perhaps maybe in your first draft, you have to put in a lot of very Christian elements. But then if you feel like you are called to take this story to a general market audience, how many of those elements need, I feel weird saying this because I'm not telling you to hide your faith. I'm certainly not. But at the same time, if you feel like you're called to reach that, is it more of an allegorical story where you can get the same thing across to people, regardless of whether you are explicitly, writing Christian elements? That's kind of like my businessy kind of branding answer. Here's my real answer. Don't worry about it. Write the story. Seriously, though, and this is somewhere that I've really landed. You have to write the story that is on your heart. And if it comes out with, and if it is a Christian fiction and that's what you have, write that. If it is not so much, but that's what resonates with you and that's what you want to write, then write that. I think that we are so worried about what everybody else is going to say. We're so worried about, like, if I have a cuss word in my story, what is my worship leader going to say to me if he knows that I have a cuss word? By the way, y'all, not in my short stories. I have cuss words in my books. I'm sorry. Yeah. That is me being authentic to the characters and to where I was at that point in my life. Right. Now, there are people who would vehemently disagree with that. And that's okay. That's fine. The book isn't for them. But it feels authentic to me. Maybe I'll change my mind in a few years and I wouldn't do that anymore, but that's at least where I'm at right now. I have very recently come to a place where I just realized that the joy of what we're doing here is not going to be in publishing and selling your book. The true joy is going to be in the creation of it. And so you have to be creating that from an authentic place. Now, paradoxically, I think that you're much more likely to be successful if you're creating from that authentic place. Yeah. But that can't be the goal. The goal has to be, what is really in my heart? And what am I courageous enough to actually put down and to be honest about what I'm dealing with and thinking about and struggling with? Put that into your book. And I'll say this to like basically to the faith-based audience, let God worry about the rest of it. Let God worry about, you know what I mean? Like the agent, the publisher, and all that kind of stuff. Let God worry about that stuff. I'm not saying don't pitch and do all those things, but at the end of the day, that's out of your control, So write the story that you need to write. Don't worry so much about the other stuff. It'll take care of itself. And if it doesn't, then that's fine. Then go on and write the next thing.
All right. Time to review the coffee. Usually, the best review of the coffee is that I drink it all. So that's a pretty good review. Nice. Very, very good. Awesome. I will say, hearing it was called Jittery Joe's, I expected probably a little more. I expected it to be sort of more bitter or more heavy or darker than it was, or the taste. But it was actually a mild taste, and this probably goes, mild being a good thing. This goes to the fact that I feel like it's like a morning brew. Sometimes those are a little bit more of a lighter roast. And so it was pleasantly light, and great. And I really liked it. I have to take a point off though, because it is from Athens.
Fair enough.
And you drank it while you were at the University of Georgia. And so I kind of as the University of Tennessee fan, I have to take a point off.
Well, because y'all need all the points you can get. I understand.
Yeah. I could taste the bulldog in it, and that was bad.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
No, great coffee. Jittery Joe's. Good. I'm going to have a link for you to get your own Jittery Joe's Wake and Bake coffee. It came in a cool tin that Clint showed you.
Really cool. Yeah. Cool logo. Yeah. Really like it.
So that's pretty sweet. And it's, I'm looking forward to drinking more of it, because that's the cool thing about Books and Brews. I get to keep that tin of coffee and drink more of it later. So Clint, tell us how we can find you.
Yeah, ClintHall.com. And if you go to ClintHall.com and click on stories, it'll take you to my Amazon page. That's where you can buy all of my short stories. Clint Hall on Instagram, author Clint Hall on Facebook and Twitter. And hey, look, I'm sure this resonates with everybody. I'm trying to build a platform just like everybody else. So I would love for you to come follow me, reach out, DM me if you have any questions or just want to talk about stuff. I am always happy to connect with new writers.
That's awesome. You can find out all about my books at andrewhuffbooks.com. You can find me on all the social media platforms as well. There's links on my website for that. And I have been just excited to do this with other authors. And so here's what I would say for you, if you're watching this and you got an author you want to see come on and find out what their favorite brew is, leave a comment below and I'll reach out to them and yeah, we'll get them on. So thanks a lot for being here, Clint. Hopefully one day soon we can grab coffee in person together.
That would be great, right? I hate that ACFW got canceled this year because it was going to be in New Orleans. That would have been awesome.
Ah, that would have been awesome.
We could have gone to Cafe
New
Du
Orleans
Monde.
coffee. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, chicory coffee at Cafe Du Monde. It's incredible.
One of these days, I'm going to have to do a Books and Brew in person with somebody. That's going to be really fun.
Awesome. So, that would be really, really cool. Yeah.
All right. I'll see you later.
All right, buddy. Have a good one.